I am Sam Pitroda. Greetings from Chicago. I'm here with my close friend, Ashoke Chatterjee, to have a conversation on celebrating 250th year of Declaration of Independence in America. It is a great milestone being celebrated all over the world and in hundreds and thousands of cities and villages in the US. I came to America 62 years ago from India. America has given me education, employment, comfort, and I've been able to build a large family in Chicago, and in particular, Chicago and Illinois has been very good to me. I'm thankful to this country, and I'm happy to be here to celebrate. But during celebration, I also want to reflect on the history, past, and the future ahead of us. Ashoke has been a close friend for over 4 decades. I would like him to give a little introduction. And I know his grandfather came to America in 19th century. To me, this is very interesting. So, Ashok, could you tell us a little bit about you before we go into the questions?
My name is Ashoke Chatterjee. That is the name is supposed to locate me. My geographic indicator should be Bengal, but it's not quite. I come from a family which is rather confused and mixed in many ways. My grandfather, Seshadri Iyengar, went to the United States in the late 19th century on a scholarship given to him by the Maharaja of Mysore on the condition that he would come back to Mysore as an engineer, which he eventually did. And he helped to set up the first hydroelectric plant in Asia, in Sivasamudram, in present-day Karnataka. But the interesting thing about my grandfather's encounter with the US, I remember a postcard that was in one of the family albums, which used to preserve all the postcards he used to send from the US. He was in Colombia and he was living in Harlem and was looked after by a black lady who he dearly loved and who looked after him very wonderfully. There's a photograph of him leaving for the US with his Kannadiga turban tightly wound around the head. I don't know whether he got off the boat with that still on or not. But there was a postcard which I remember seeing with a scribble that he wrote to the lady he would marry on his return, my grandmother. And in it, he said, "I'm here in New York. I am living in the future." So that was a young Indian at the turn of the century for whom New York was about the future. And in a way, I guess that has been the image that the US has carried for generations of Indians and made it a magnet for people from all over the world. The sense that if you went to America, you are touching the future of humankind.
Great.
I had another intense immersion in America during my childhood, which was spent in a Himalayan town called Missouri. And there I was educated in what I can only describe as a transplanted Midwest USA. This was a school called Woodstock School, which had been established by American missionaries, many of them Protestants and Presbyterians. But I grew up there, and I was nurtured by my classmates. Most of them were Americans. My teachers, most of them were Americans. And here in the high Himalayas, 7,000 feet above sea level, in this incredible little town of Missouri, we also had a kind of a second track existence, which was very much like the Midwest. We had all the customs, the county fairs, the square dancing, all the music of America. We grew up with it. And it was a strange combination of an American childhood in the Himalayas. And one of my colleagues, the author Stephen Alter, has written a book about it, about what the strange growing up was like for all of us. And when I graduated from school, most of my colleagues, my American colleagues, went off to the US. And it was still great ambition for everybody else to somehow go there. So I carried this with me a long time, and then eventually I landed up myself in Washington, where I lived and worked for 6 years. So in a sense, my own background is confused, but it confused at a very American level of sometimes not knowing which half of me is there and which half of me is here, or whether it really matters. But the interesting thing that happened through all of this was an extraordinary, I suppose one can only call it an Indo-American culture. Generations of young people who came from the US and many other parts of the world to this school and still do, experiencing India in their own way and creating a kind of, what can I say, almost a culture, a country of its own, which is Indian in many, many ways and American in many, many ways. And for many of my classmates, their return to the US, you have to remember that in those days, people couldn't fly back and forth. These people came, they spent years in America, in India. Occasionally, they would get on a boat and go back, and then 1 year later, come back again on another boat. It was a very different sort of
Mode
the
of
ability to
transport.
go back and forth that is taken for granted today was not there then. So many of them, when they left India and went back to the US, many of them to Illinois, many of them to Chicago, lots of them to Ohio, right next door to you, which is where I went to college also. It was traumatic for them because America in those days knew very little about India. And many of these young people who looked totally American went back to a country where many of them thought they were very weird and couldn't figure out what they were. And of course, the word Indian itself was open to many interpretations. So I come from this kind of a background where America is not just a place on the map, it's in a way the place where my mind grew up. And it's in a place which has always been home, long before I actually went there. And yet, when I went there, I realized that I really wanted to be in India. And I came back. I came back at a time when very few people were willing to think that India had a future. So when I came back in the 60s, that was a time when America was in turmoil. And I came back to an India which was also going through a difficult time in many, many ways. So this anniversary is just not another date for people like me. I think of my grandfather and what he went through, and I wonder what he would make of the country that he loved so much, even though he was only there for 2 or 3 years.
Thank you, Ashok. My journey was different. I was born and raised in a small little tribal village in Orissa, had no connection with America, knew very little about Western way of life, grew up in a lower middle class family, but went to a good school in Baroda. But still had very little idea of what America was all about. One fine day, I read in the newspaper that Kennedy has decided to take men onto the moon. And I thought that was romantic. I was young, energetic, and I decided to come to America to get a PhD in physics. At a time when I had never seen a revolving door, I was fascinated with the doorknob in America. I knew how to design TV, but I had never seen one. I had never used telephone. I had never used fork and knife. So for me, the journey was all about learning new things. So I think we both come from a different angle. But let's start by exploring first question. What are we really celebrating? Like you said, we are celebrating 250th year of a nation, which has given a lot to the world. A declaration of independence, to me, was a very revolutionary, visionary, bold document. It was an extraordinary statement of human dignity. This was at a time when slavery was still practiced. There was no gender equality, but it was still a revolutionary idea that power can be in the hands of the people. And the focus ought to be on democracy, liberty, freedom, constitutional government. All of these ideas were very interesting. And I believe that we are basically celebrating that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. We're celebrating that. And yet, when we use the word celebrating, I think we are using that word in a slightly different way to what one might talk about having a great grand party and distributing balloons and confetti. Because both these democracies, both the US and United States and India, are going through a period where the very institutions that they have shared and in a way mutually inspired each other are today under enormous stress. So if we talk about the American democracy being under stress, we should understand that that is equally true in India. When we talk about what are we celebrating, I think that's equally true here, where people are looking forward to 2047, which will be 100 years of India's freedom. What exactly are we going to celebrate on that date? And possibly in this kind of reflection, there is the opportunity to understand once again how delicate and how fragile those principles are that are enshrined in the American uh, Constitution, in its Declaration of Independence, and in the Indian Constitution, which draws so heavily on the American Constitution for many of its most fundamental values and concepts. I don't know whether the founding fathers in the US or in India quite anticipated how soon these values would be challenged. In America, we had it with the Civil War. In India, we have had it with the great disruptions that have taken place over the past few decades, and where some of the most basic elements and values of the freedom struggle are now under review, under criticism, and in fact, perhaps there are those in our country who feel that's all out of date. We're seeing exactly the same thing happening in the USA. So is it just coincidence that these two democracies are now democracies with a question mark at the end of that word? Is it coincidence, or is history trying to tell us something?
I think this brings us to the next topic I want to talk about, and that is America's greatest contribution. Because what you are saying, I believe, has something to do with social media, new technology, new tools, connectivity. America has really contributed to humanity beyond borders. And that contribution came more in terms of technology. I always remind myself that transistor was born 5 years after I was born. And the birth of transistor in America really changed the history of the world. America focused on scientific discoveries, electricity, telephone, transistor, and coming out of that, computers, software, smartphones, internet, uh, cloud computing, and now finally AI. Not to mention biotech, DNA, space communication, or space exploration. But the artificial intelligence, where we are today, is really culmination of all of these technologies. And world has benefited from all the things America did. Without American contribution, you won't have access to a lot of these technologies and tools. How do you react to that?
Well, in a way, I think this is possibly what my grandfather meant when he put on that postcard that I'm living in the future. Because I think what the US has always been is a kind of beacon of hope
Mhm.
and of opportunity. And maybe that hope and opportunity was based on technological advancement and showing and really inventing the contemporary, what we call the modern way of life, the modern lifestyle. It was all invented and tested and exported from the United States via Europe to countries like ours. And now, if you walk into a shopping mall here in Ahmedabad, you can see that the educated, affluent Indian finds great comfort in mimicking a lifestyle which he or she thinks approximates what is happening in North America. Right?
True.
My granddaughter pushed me into a place for lunch the other day in a shopping mall, and the big sign above our table was, "From Texas to Ahmedabad with love."
Good.
We thought
But
this was great.
American universities and research, entrepreneurship, venture capital, philanthropy have also played an important role in this process of globalization. But I believe there are some good things and there are some bad things. To me, consumption has become a way of life as opposed to conservation. And that's what you are talking about. You know, America has made significant contribution, but we really need to understand what is good about it and what is not so good about it. You know, America did help in transforming knowledge and making it more accessible. Now, knowledge is democratized. I don't need to really go to great American universities to have access to the professors, libraries, documents, reports. I think this has been a greatest contribution by America to the humanity or for the humanity. Still, the basic question is, what is America's moral promise? On one hand, the achievements relate to civil rights, women's rights, religious freedom, freedom of speech, immigration, innovations, and opportunities. But on the other hand, slavery is staring us in the eyes, like colonization of the past, segregation, treatment of Native Americans, inequality, especially income inequality, where few people are very rich and lots of people have problem making ends meet. Racism, poverty, political polarization. These are the issues that we are faced with. So from your viewpoint, what is America's moral promise?
I think America's moral promise was exactly what we are celebrating when we look at that document which was signed 250 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That still remains the promise of America.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it provides a very difficult benchmark for America to live up to, just as our Constitution gives us exactly the same challenge. But when you say what is the value, you just mentioned something that now you don't have to go to America to have access to those professors.
Mm-hmm.
But America was not just about access to sources of knowledge. It was also about going to a country which gave you the space to express yourself and to explore your own capabilities
Mhm.
in a way that home countries often could not or would not give you.
Mhm.
To my mind now, the great loss or the great danger in those very spaces which are full of knowledge and wisdom, like the American campuses have always been, they themselves are threatened with the need to be careful about what you say, what you teach, and what you think. Now, that to me is therefore a colossal loss because it was that which made America not just its technology, not just the fact that there was all these sources of information and wisdom that one could encounter there, but to be in a country and in a society which allowed you to think and think freely. And to me, if that is not protected, then we have to really ask the question, what indeed are we celebrating? Should we be celebrating or should we be mourning the loss of something very precious which America gave the world for all these years and which made it a magnet for so many young people to think that if somehow they could cross the waters and get to that country, they would have a chance. What that chance was, they may not know, but the country stood for giving you a chance to explore your own capacities and to grow in ways which no other society could provide. I think that's the real opportunity as well as the challenge.
I think that brings us to the fact that America is a nation of immigrants. Like you said, so many young people want to come to America, first for education, learn, and then for job to earn. Why do a lot of these immigrants want to come to America? What made America such an attractive place to come to? What opportunities America offers that others don't offer? And what are the responsibilities of the immigrants here? I feel America offers freedom, liberty, freedom to move, freedom to say, freedom to, work, freedom to religion, all that. But then I, as an immigrant, also have responsibility to follow the law, pay my taxes, work in the community, and basically integrate into the system. So immigration has been the key to American prosperity. Living in Chicago, I know there are Italians and Polish and um, Scandinavians and Africans and Indians and Asians and people from Philippines and you name it. Every community from all over the world is here. When I came to Chicago, there were no more than 500-600 people of Indian origin. This was in 1964. Now there are about 250,000 people. There was no restaurant for Indian food until 74. Now there are probably over 200 restaurants. So immigrants have played an important role. And it is a country of immigrants. What has been your experience?
Well, yes, I agree with that. When I was in college in the US, there were a lot of students from all over the world. Uh, Not all of them were planning to remain in the US, but certainly the pull of immigration was very strong. And the fact that America gave you choices. I think that's one of the big things, the very big part of what people call the American dream is the fact that the US held out. Uh, how accurate it was, that depend on the individual. But the fact that you had choices, and choices were not something that other societies often gave their youth. You were channeled into professions, into ways of earning, ways of living, which were decided for you by your heritage or by your generation. America was a way to escape from that, in a sense, and to be able to chart one's own future.
Mhm.
So obviously, the America is a land of immigrants, and for that, I think the what has been going on in America for the past few years is deeply disturbing because you have that great statue in New York where the Lady of Liberty is lifting up her torch and saying, "Give me your tired, give me your poor." America doesn't seem to believe that anymore. So I would say that if you want to celebrate this year or mark this year, what should that lady now be saying? If you say that "give me your tired and your poor" is no longer a message, then what should she be saying? What should be written on that document that she holds in one hand, and on the other she's holding up a torch and saying, "I lift my lamp beside the golden door"? What does she actually mean?
Yeah,
That you have
maybe
to
maybe
pay your
now
way,
she's saying, "Give me your rich and give me your, best brains."
give me your gold.
Yeah, exactly.
But would you have the courage then to say that the Statue of Liberty has to change her message?
Mhm.
Because then you would be really asking yourself that we've come 250 years. She was the culmination, symbolic culmination of the Declaration of Independence. And she's saying, "Give me your tired and your poor."
I
And
think
now
that
you
brings us,
have a
yeah,
leadership which is saying, "Get the bloody hell out of here."
I know. I think this brings us to the next question is, has America changed? I have personally seen America change in the last 62 years. I think America has become more divided. America has polarized politics. Uh, the trust in the government has declined. Power and profit have become the goal for everybody. And I always say that in the process, we have forgotten that our main responsibility is to planet and people. And social media has created echo chambers, confusion with misinformation. And I believe social media is single handedly responsible for weakening democracy. I'm convinced of that because everybody has their opinion without really understanding the facts. Everyone wants to advise, and in the process, nobody is listening. I find that all the time in younger people. They have no patience to listen. Before you say a word, they have an answer based on few buzzwords they have either heard on CNN or seen on social media. So I think America has changed substantially, especially in the last 20 years. What do you think?
Well, no question about that. I have to deal with two grandchildren whose faces I seldom see because they're buried in their smartphones, and it takes something to get them to even acknowledge that there's another world around them. But I'm just wondering about whether things were really different before. Were people really communicating with each other? Uh, or was it this that the climate in which we lived was not as noisy as it is today? Because those opportunities to be heard, to explore, to to be in several worlds at the same time, which these young people are today, those things just simply did not exist. But I'm not sure whether there's been any fundamental change in how shall I express it? In the wisdom of people. Uh, you just accepted a lot earlier, which the younger generation does not. And I don't think we want to go back to an era where there weren't all these opportunities for communication. There wasn't all this noise and the static, ugly as some of this is. Do we really want to shut it off? Or
No, it cannot be shut off anymore.
it can't be shut off. Exactly, it can't be shut off. Or is there a need to go back again to certain values? And I think this is where the whole debate that surrounds us for the last 20, 30 years, and if not more, of sustainability takes great importance. Because if we want to talk about a sustainable planet, then we have to talk about responsibility. And that responsibility also exists. If one is talking about the US, what is the responsibility of immigrant communities? I was, in my years in Washington, and I'm talking about the 60s, one of the things that really struck me was how everybody who seemed to be coming into the US from outside, the first thing they seem to be wanting to do is beat the system. And it would just seem to be that everybody accepted that. You come to the US and then you just have to do your utmost to exploit every chance America gives you. And I often wondered, when is this going to end? When is there going to be pushback? Right?
Interesting.
And so certainly true of the Indian community and my Indian, Pakistani and colleagues. I mean, we all felt that you come here, then the first thing you have to do is to exploit America to the fullest. And I could never quite understand how that was tolerated.
Yeah, yeah.
So I
But that
think
also
that
comes from insecurity.
insecurity, yes, but also a feeling which I find has grown in intensity with the number of Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis who have South Asians who've gone from here to the US. The I often wonder, where does that loyalty actually lie? Everyone wants a green card, everyone wants an American passport, but when push comes to shove, if Mr. Trump wants them to line up for conscription or going to fight his wars, are they going to be there, lined up, do that, or all the way running home?
Yeah.
So I think around the world, this is also a point at which one has to ask about what citizenship and being part of society actually means, irrespective of what passport you hold.
Exactly.
Maybe a passport is
Exactly.
uh, no longer your identity. You need something more. And your identity is your value system. And that brings us straight back to the American Constitution and the Indian Constitution. Those are the values that we share.
And where your home is, where do you live? You know,
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you know,
Exactly.
where do you
What
earn
is
and where
the
do you have your
concept of
children grow up?
what is the concept of home?
Exactly.
I think those are very important issues.
Yep.
And I suppose every generation has to define it for themselves.
Hmm.
But what can America and India, what kind of a conversation can they have which will not promise answers, but will offer opportunities for wisdom,
Hmm.
for making better choices?
Yep.
That to me is extremely basic.
Thank you.
And finally, at the end of the day, what is the value you're willing to live for and to die for?
Yep.
And that, I think, is where big question marks exist
Yeah, but
today.
people never think about these things because they are so wrapped up in day-to-day stuff. Their immediate goal is to make money, more money, buy expensive stuff, live luxurious life, show off to their friends and family that they are doing well with big vacation and big car and big home and all that. And that becomes the end game, unfortunately, you know.
So I think in the 250th year of the Declaration of Independence, one has to ask, is that actually what America stands for? Is it?
Yeah.
If it is, then does America have the courage to say that's what we stand for? You can
First, you got to
take it.
recognize.
Huh?
First, you got to recognize that that is a real issue.
That is the real issue.
Yeah.
And it's not just an American issue.
Yeah. It's a
It's
global.
the, it's global. It's
And that brings me to America's global leadership. On one hand, we talk about democracy, science, innovation, human rights, peace, climate leadership, international cooperations. And on the other hand, we talk about greed, you know, and I'm very concerned about the American greed. Everybody wants to really worry about money, stock market, growth. And I think that part of American leadership bothers me. Can America lead by inspiration instead of domination? Is a major question. Today, America is leading based on domination. We are a military power. We are a financial power. We are powerful and we are rich. From there, can America say, I don't need to be powerful, I don't need to be rich, but I need to be a guiding light for humanity? I think to me, it's a very complicated question.
a very complicated question, Sam, but it's also an essential question.
Yeah.
Because if we can't answer it, or if we can't at least try to answer it, uh, then we have nothing to really celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
Because the promise 250 years ago was that we are going to, in the United States, build a society like no other, which gives a promise to its people like no other society has given. That was the premise on which the Declaration of Independence was drafted. And later, what followed,
Mm-hmm.
including the Civil War and the history.
Mm-hmm.
But those questions are equally valid to other countries and other societies which should also ask that question. They shouldn't leave it just to the United States.
Yep.
Because if the US has had that burden of being what my grandfather said, I'm living in the future, but we're all in that future now.
Mm-hmm.
America may have shown us the way, but we're all there, whether we like it or not.
Yep.
So it's not just America's problem, it's all of ours.
Yeah. But I think the question related to this should be, what should America fix? Okay. And if you look at, based on my own experience, I find education has become too expensive. When I went to college 60 years ago, 62 years ago, tuition was in hundreds of dollars. Now it is in tens of thousands of dollars. Healthcare. We spend 18% of GDP on healthcare. Too expensive. We need political reforms. We need election reforms, campaign funding. We need better justice system. We need to improve income inequality, which is a fundamental challenge. We need more housing. So there are lots of challenges that America needs to fix. A lot of American infrastructure is old. When I go to China and see the new infrastructure compared to what we have in America, I said there is a huge need to upgrade infrastructure. So America has a lot of things to fix at this point in time. While America is focused on global leadership, America is to some extent preoccupied with Chinese competition. You talk to anybody in America, they all talk about beating China, staying ahead of China in AI game, bringing manufacturing from China to here. And I think American vision has to be different. I think American vision has to be more about America's role in taking humanity to the next level, and not as America's role in fighting China or worrying about China becoming a superpower. So I think this is a very large, again, a complicated conversation. Saying, should America just get out of this mindset which says, I got to beat China, and say, no, I have a bigger responsibility based on the past performance. I got to take humanity to the next level using AI and other tools that America has helped develop. What do you think?
Well, I don't think there's any argument about that. Certainly it isn't. The only point I would make is that this is not just a challenge for the USA.
Yeah.
It is for all of us.
Yes.
Because this basic message may be to the US that do you really want to see the Declaration of Independence as a competitive weapon? Because that was not what it was
Mm-hmm.
in the minds of the founding fathers. It was a value system. It was not about competition. And I think one of the biggest tragedies of the American way of life is that so much of it is interpreted as a constant competition.
Mm-hmm.
And to my mind, maybe that comes from the capitalist economy and the capitalist way of looking at things. But America has also been in the forefront of reflection and understanding that the world is not about competition. It is about building a just society and about caring for the planet. America has made enormous contributions to that dimension of defining progress. So I think for all of us, and this comes back to what we are talking about of 250 years of celebration, what exactly do we consider progress? And only when we have a consensus on that can some of these other things fall into place.
To me,
And I
progress
think
is.
the world is,
Go ahead, Ashok. Sorry.
no, that's that. Go ahead, please
No,
go
I
ahead.
was saying, to me, the progress is not about economic prosperity for few. Progress is not about growth, GDP, GNP, per capita income, balance of payment. Progress is about ending global poverty, hunger, preventing wars, climate action. Progress is about global education. Progress is about digital inclusion for everybody. Progress is about networking of nations, international collaborations. Progress is about equality. Progress is about justice. And I think that's where America can make a great contribution by using new technologies, AI and all, to lift everybody. And that's the challenge for the next 250 years. One, to protect democracy, two, to modernize institutions, embrace diversity, reduce poverty, inequality, hunger, protect the planet, and remind people that the key is not to focus on power and profit, which America to some extent is hung up today, but to really make planet livable for our generations and next generations and generation after that, and take care of the people. Build trust. I think we have lost trust. To me, that is the real challenge for America while we are celebrating 250th years of Declaration of Independence.
I would agree with you. So to me, it seems to me that it would be great for America to reflect on these issues and to come up, at least to whatever extent it can, through the course of these celebrations, to communicate to the world what values it considers non-negotiable
Mhm.
in terms of justice for the planet and justice for the people who live on the planet.
Mhm.
I think if we can do that much, then the question comes back to that lady with the lamp who's standing there on welcoming immigrants or maybe not welcoming immigrants. But what is she actually trying to say? In 2026, what is her message? What's written on the plaque that she stands on the pedestal of what she stands? What is she holding in her hand? Because if
When
you
I
leave her,
talk, when
if you
I
just
talk
leave
to
her
my
standing,
friend, go
yeah,
ahead, go ahead,
go ahead.
please. No, you go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, to bring this all down, it can sound quite absurd. But to me, the Statue of Liberty is a very good place to still a symbol. You gave this symbol to the world. Is it your symbol today or is it not?
It's a good question.
If it's not your symbol, then do you think you want to sell her for scrap? Or do you want to change the message that she's carrying? What the hell do you want to do with her? Because she can't stand there staring at the world and have you kick her in the pants. You can't do that.
Mhm.
At least have the courage to say, lady, your day is over.
When I talk to my friends at universities, business, foundations, even in my neighborhood, I find in general people to be very generous, very open, very friendly. American DNA at certain level is all about generosity. Then you come to another level where there is poverty, hunger, violence. And as a result, I find that there are certain contradictions in American system. But those who are generous are also locked up in wealth generation. And they
What?
lose sight of what they need to do to lift other people in the society. You look at south side of Chicago, it's so very different from rest of the Chicago. But rest of the Chicago doesn't really care about south side of Chicago much. Violence has not changed in Chicago in the last 62 years I've been around. We get same number of deaths every summer. There is a lot of poverty there. But the rich in Chicago hasn't or haven't been able to address that. So there is this dichotomy. If large number of generous people get together today and look at the global challenge for America, they'll probably come to the same answers that you and I discussed. So on one hand, we know what should America fix. The key question is, what is the role of America in building humanity, and how do we see AI and the role of AI in this? Comments?
Well, I think that's a good question, but I would not leave it as a question addressed just to America.
Mhm.
I think it's a question that's addressed to all societies, because
Agree.
in all societies, the same syndrome is happening.
Mhm.
Those who are better off are neglecting those who are deprived.
Mhm.
And some of them make the excuse today
Mhm.
that, well, if America can do it, why can't we? But the message of the American Constitution and the Indian Constitution is that we are not, no man is an island. We are responsible for each other. And I think that's really the American value that was universal.
Mhm.
That is universal. And I think that is what needs to be rediscovered, not just in America, but globally. I think that is really a opportunity. 250 years is not just the responsibility for the United States of America. It is a responsibility for all free societies everywhere.
Yeah, I think we tend to forget that America also has to learn from other nations. And other nations have to learn from America. Simple issue like, how can we disagree without becoming enemies? See, today it's very difficult to really have a disagreement without seen as enemy. Can America remain world leader in innovation without competition? Can America invest enough in the young? I mean, these are all the big questions for the next 250 years. What gives us biggest hope from America is American people, American Constitution, Is American focus on democracy? Is American focus on rule of law? What worries me is that we have taken on a path which is focused more on power and profit, greed, and in the process we tend to tweak rule of law in our favor. We treat others with disrespect, and at times we compromise American values. Institutions are not given the independence they need, even in America today. You mentioned earlier about universities, and universities' freedom has been questioned in the past. So I think the real challenge today is America has to really look inward to find global responsibilities in a very different way. What do you say?
Well, I think you're right. This is a good opportunity for America to define its role as not just as a global leader, but as a society which 250 years ago claimed that it was going to create a society which was different.
Mhm.
And here's an opportunity to say, okay, what was that difference that American society wanted to achieve?
Mhm.
Where is it today? But simultaneously indicate that all of these questions are not just addressed to America. They are
Mhm.
addressed to the rest of the world because the rest of the world mimics America.
Mhm.
It's constantly trying to catch up with America. It constantly sees the American way of life and the American dream as its own way of life and its own dream. And
Mhm.
we see that all around us here in India today. And I think this is what we were warned by Gandhiji and by others. Even earlier, Swami Vivekananda, when he went to the US, he himself made these observations that our job is not to mimic each other, it's to learn from each other. And what in the year 2026 does American society think we should take from them? And what has it learned along the way that is a warning for all of us? That look, we got there first, and you be careful. Otherwise, you too will face the kind of problems that we have faced in the USA. But that requires an openness of dialogue and of trust and of sharing and conversation, which is not happening. The two democracies are not talking to each other the way you and I are talking to each other.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, what can we do to at least open up channels of communication between these two democracies?
Because I think Indians are talking to Indians and Americans are talking to Americans,
Or talking to themselves.
talking to itself. You are absolutely right. I think we have already spent about hour and 11 minutes. I didn't realize that. So maybe, do you want to say something in closing before I say a few words in closing?
I think, except it's been great to talk to you and a lot of food for reflection. And I think the real message that I have is that this anniversary reminds us that we're all in this together and what a huge responsibility democracy really is.
Thank you, Ashok. Thank you very much for spending time with me. And I always admire your view and, you know, the way you sort of stick to the fundamentals. Uh, Thank you very much. I've always gained from you. So I'd like to summarize this by saying for 250 years, America has shown the world that democracy is not a destination, but it's a continuous journey. We always have to be on guard. We cannot allow democracy to be derailed. And it's not just the responsibility of the government, but it is really the responsibility of the people. In this process of democracy, we have stumbled, corrected ourselves, innovated, and learned. America has always welcomed generations from every corner of the world, people like me, and expanded the boundaries of human possibilities. I cannot imagine what I would be without coming to America. The other day, I was talking to my sister, and we were talking about our family. And I said, three fundamental things changed the trajectory of our poor family. One, my father leaving Gujarat to go to Orissa looking for work. That was a migration within India. Not many people did that from Gujarat. Second, my parents recognized that education is the most important thing and sent me to a boarding school when I was 9 years old. That was a tough decision for them to send me to 1,000 miles with my brother to study. And the third major decision, which was the most important one, for me to come to America. I came here in 1962, and now I have 100 family members in the US. This is my direct family, not my cousins, my brothers, sisters, their children. And there are 8 doctors. There are scientists, there are mathematicians in my family. And they have changed America, and they have contributed to humanity. So bringing people from every corner of the world, America has benefited a great deal. The next chapter in America should not be about becoming more powerful. It should be more about becoming more just, more helpful, more inclusive, more compassionate, and more responsible. If we can continue freedom with equality, innovation with ethics, prosperity with sustainability, and participation and patriotism from humanity, then America's great contribution may still be ahead in the next 250 years. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam.